Good evening, YouTube followers. I've been busy. I was publishing my third book. It was published the end of January, thanks to Creative Lake Press and my company, Dr. Rome Fraser Enterprises. Uh, that book is finished. You can check it out. It's called To a More Positive Purpose. That quote comes from Tony Martin's own ideas in his last book, Caribbean History. Some of those who worked in the West Indian Regiment, which is like the British colonial army, received Garvey's message and chose to put his words to a more positive purpose than the purpose they were already serving in the West India Regiment. So it just gets us to think about knowledge. That whole title of my third book is about the application of knowledge, which is wisdom. Wanted to lift up a very special light who, since my last YouTube live, my previous YouTube live, has passed, Ms. Dorie Ladner. There was an awesome service earlier this month. Today is Easter Sunday. Happy Easter. Easter means so much. He is risen, as Bob Marley said in the song War, memorably portrayed by Kingsley Ben-Adir. Good will triumph over evil. And that's what I think of when I think about Easter, rising, the rising. Um, Truth cannot be suppressed, stamped out, silenced. It will rise up always again. So I'm grateful for the life and the revolutionary work of Jesus Christ and the community that helped create him before the Council of Nicaea. I was talking to a friend who said they were reading about that council and what a dramatic shift in the church that council had. That's so different from the original church, which is so different from um, the church that Jesus, Frumentius and Odysseus, first evangelized to Aksum, classical African civilization now in Egypt. She is the light. I think she is one of the many lights that I came across in my life when I was living in DC from 2016 to 2022. I ran into her at least three times. Two of them was at the Sankofa bookstore on Georgia Avenue, right across the street from Howard. And she, I am teaching in my class right now the role of SNCC, and she was a very proud, instrumental member of SNCC. SNCC is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that was founded in 1960 with the mentorship of Ella Baker. She gave an amazing interview, Ms. Dorie Ladner, with Black Power Chronicles from the University of District of Columbia. They interviewed her, and I remember a lot of things from that interview she gave them. I was living in DC at the time she gave that interview. She was born in Palmer's Crossing, went to the traditional college that she was supposed to go to, Jackson State. But what's remarkable about the life of Dorie Ladner for me is how she stood up to Negro authority. And when I say Negro, I mean those who are Black individuals who prefer to remain in the Jim Crow order. Like she just ran them over, or she and her sister, Dr. Joyce Ladner, who was former president of Howard University, um, played instrumental roles in really questioning the Jim Crow assumptions of Negro authority, particularly in Mississippi where they were born. And one of the three times I did see her was at a conference about Pan Africanism, and she gave me the probably one of the most powerful, amazing comments anyone could ever give me. She said that I looked like Kwame Toure, birth name Stokely Carmichael, which was a big compliment. And I had just written and published a review of a biography of Kwame Toure. So I had studied him thoroughly, and I still am inspired by the words of the Cancerian man, Kwame Toure. Um, and like Kwame Toure, Dorie Ladner is also a late June Cancer. I believe Toure is the 29th, and she is the 28th, the day before. Uh, I just got incredible love, incredible energy. This was an amazing program that was on WPFW on the 18th. It featured Dr. Greg Carr, Ayanna Gregory, Cynthia Palmer, Dr. Frank Smith, of the Civil Rights Museum, and it really paid her great respect. But I encourage each of us listening to my YouTube live, read books about her. It's one thing to watch her in interviews, it's another thing to read her in the books. Two particular books I remembered, and shout out to my colleague Josh, who pointed a second book out to me that since she passed, I had to reread to just remind myself of the importance of her work. People like her sister, people like Kwame Toure, who were part of organizations like SNCC, made a dramatic change in society that should be studied. That's all part of the African American history that seems like a fad sometimes, seems popular, seems like a political ploy to look conservative, safe enough for voters. But it's instrumental. It's important that every child, parents teach their child in this country uh, what who Dorie Ladner is, what organizations that she was part of did to change this country and make it better. Two particular books that I think do a remarkable job of highlighting her importance. The first one I read in grad school by Charles Payne, I've Got the Light of Freedom, the organizing tradition and the Mississippi freedom struggle. What's amazing about this book is the anecdotes, the stories. There's one way you can get history, which is the traditional way with the dates and the events and the dates and the events and the dates and the events. In this book by Dr. Payne, he really makes it exciting through the stories, through the personal stories of suspense, where you're rooting for SNCC workers to remove the scale from the eyes of the Mississippi voters, to remove those scales of fear, of reprisal. And he tells a beautiful story of Dorie Ladner in Mississippi at Jackson State. And I just wanted to read an excerpt. This is from, let's see, page 91. Payne writes, this was a common pattern of recruitment into the movement. In the 1960s, the Ladner sisters, Dorie and Joyce, were asked to leave Jackson State College because of their activism. And see, this is the part of Dorie Ladner's life that I think inspires me, even if, you know, you know you're standing up for the right thing. She was particularly protesting the food service at Jackson State, which she thought was the subpar, inferior food that was served. But just the way she stood up to the then Jackson State College president, Radix, is inspiring. And it just inspires me to stand up to individuals who behave like Negroes today. And we see a lot of them, who claim to know about the influence of the SNCC movement and the Black Panther movement, but in practice they don't. They don't behave. They behave heavy-handed. They behave authoritarian. I say these people are really not carrying the legacy that Dorie Ladner and Kwame Ture has given us. Um, Charles Payne writes, Dorie and Joyce were asked to leave Jackson State College because of their activism. They transferred to the more receptive atmosphere at Tougaloo. Subsequently, Dorie dropped out of school 3 times to work for SNCC. Joyce dropped out once, and both did movement work when they were in school. In the late 50s, they were teenagers growing up in Hattiesburg, and they grew up surrounded by models of commitment. And that's one thing that Dorie Ladner said in her interviews with Black Power Chronicles, which you can watch on YouTube. Um, the mentorship she received very personally from none other than Medgar Evers, who was also very close friends with Ayanna Gregory. Who is the father of Ayanna Gregory, who performed at the memorial on PFW earlier this month. Um, yes, Dorie was mentored by Medgar Evers, who gave her a lot of details about the rights as citizens that they have, that they do not have to be intimidated out of the vote, among other things. Dorie Ladner says Medgar Evers taught her and her sister. Um, so that is an amazing story. I wanted to go to another book that I really learned a lot from. This one was given to me by my colleague, Dr. Joshua Myers, told me about this one. Shelter in a Time of Storm, How Black Colleges Fostered Generations of Leadership and Activism. This one is by Jelani Favors. He has an amazing part in there that I highlighted, particularly at Jackson State, the part where Dorie Ladner made that fateful choice to leave. And around this time that I was reading this book, I was also seeing an amazing program going on, and Dr. Anthony Montero invited me to attend the Saturday Free School. And I encourage everybody on this because it brings back that energy of study. It brings back that energy of political awareness, that I know was around. Right now, I'm also reading Margaret Walker's biography of Richard Wright, called Richard Wright, Demonic Genius. And I'm trying to get past this chapter, and I can't get past this particular chapter where Margaret Walker is describing um, when Richard Wright comes to Chicago and works at the post office, and he becomes politicized. His workplace is a radicalizing space. This is a specific time in American society, in American history. And I was telling a colleague, no other time was the workplace a place where you could become politically educated and radicalized. And that's what happened to Richard Wright in his workplace. Because of his postal office workplace and the older workers there who were very politically educated, he chose to join the John Reed Society, which is a study group. And that's, in my mind, what's vital to saving this country when the media is preaching fear about the this year's 2024 presidential election. I always get quiet, and in my quiet time I think about the value of those study groups, which is people coming together after having read, after being quiet, after engaging somebody else's ideas, and then talking with a bunch of other people about those same ideas. That was what the John Reed Club did for Richard Wright, and there's value in that. In this particular book, I want to see if I can zoom in. Um, there was a part where, and what is underlined, I can't really see it clear, but I happen to also have the same image on my phone, um, and I want to pull it up because in this excerpt of Favors' book is what Dorie Ladner says specifically to her boss, who was the president of Jackson State College. Um, it's in a text now, I'm realizing. So I'm pulling up the text. Um, Here is the text. And what I have, yeah, basically, this part is where President Radix tells Dorie Ladner to leave campus, and she does. As we learned from Charles Payne's book, she leaves Jackson State College to go to Tougaloo, where she is able to be a student and work in SNCC. She could not be a student at Jackson State and work in SNCC. And it's so sad, but it reminded me of the Saturday Free School with Anthony Montero. They were reading James Baldwin's essay, They Can't Turn Back, when Baldwin was at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. And that was the part where he was talking about the role of the Negro college president, how they have to create Negro students. They cannot create activist students like Bobby Seale or Huey Newton, who are community college students, Merritt College, but they could not, the Negro college, the HBCU in the 50s, could not have students participating in groups like a Black Panther Party, in groups like a Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So Dorie Ladner's life shows the importance of young people organizing and making that a priority, organizing to destroy Jim Crow, organizing to register Black voters in Mississippi, organizing to destroy Jim Crow. And that's important work. But unfortunately, the Negro status quo resisted her. And that story really captures me. So thank you, Jelani Favors, for writing this incredibly important book. I highly recommend it. Um, this book is called, once again, Shelter in a Time of Storm. And also, I highly recommend Charles Payne's book, I've Got the Light of Freedom. You can get these books at your local library, which is going to bring me to a later point about my belief that X is not racist. You have the right to follow who you can follow. If you find somebody racist or if you are triggered, you can unfollow them or you can block them. But to engage the way people engage with on X and take this position that, yes, it's changed since Musk took ownership, but because it's social media, you can use it in a way where you don't have to entertain foolishness, low vibration. You see somebody that says something that's silly, stupid, don't follow them. Or you can choose to follow them and see how they think, which reminds me of the point I made in my third book about uh, Tony Martin's annotated bibliography, which is the bibliography of a book collection by Robert Adger. Robert Adger had an extensive collection of books on Darwinism. Is that because Adger and Martin believe in Darwinism? No. It's because they had to be aware of how, uh, what shall we say, the colonizing culture thinks, because that will allow you to psychologically, intellectually prepare yourself for the BS when you see it, because you are going to see some BS in these coming days. So, understanding the other points of view that you may not personally agree with is not cause to write the social media space X off as a racist space. It's a space where you learn how people think. And in many cases, they're not stating what they think. There's still a lot of performance in a lot of people's tweets who tweet one thing, especially the super wealthy and the politicians. They spout certain values, but we all know their behavior says otherwise. Their behavior says the opposite. So I want to get to that. I do want to shout out this amazing interview that Vlad did because in it, Stephanie Mills talked about the Black artist and how, in certain cases, the Black artist is betrayed by the Black journalist. And she gave two particular examples. Michael Jackson, how he was betrayed by Oprah, choosing to interview his accusers, and then when Ms. Winfrey saw the threat of the estate suing her and the effort of that documentary, she withdrew. Also, Ms. Mills gave another awesome example of Gail King exploiting R. Kelly, uh, particularly in the questioning to have that emotional explosion. You know, I believe also like Ms. Mills that Gail knew what she was doing, and that was exploitive and immoral. And our Black artists should not be taken advantage of like that because they already have charges against them, and they're basically, going to be prosecuted. Which brings us to P. Diddy. A friend of mine pointed out an article to me that reminded me of a page I read in John Potash's book, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders. Basically, the story was saying that Toure, the journalist, and I put journalist in air quotes because I just see him similar to Don Lemon as a mouthpiece for industry, just spouting the same rhetoric that the industry wants us to believe about a specific artist. That was absolutely clear in what John Potash wrote um, when he discusses Tupac and the case against Tupac. Definitely the furor that was whipped up in the media against him, so that by the time he has died in '97. We as the public have to believe it's because he preached violence, similar to Malcolm X, and the way that the New York Times more or less co-signed on his assassination, suggesting that he died violently because he preached violence. So that assumption I'm always interested in questioning um, because it reminds me of how the newspapers will exalt who they want you to exalt, who they want to be exalted, and it's up to the reader to be more critically thinking. If you're getting blessed by information I'm sharing and I'm reading, please bless my Cash App. It's $ Roan Fraser will be greatly appreciated. And please subscribe, share, and like my YouTube if you're watching this now. My handle is Roan Fraser on IG as well as X. And this is my first YouTube live in months because I had to write my book. I had to finish it. I had to finish it. And I'm grateful I did take a long break. Planning great events for the month of April. This is the last day of March. Was able to get a lot of things done. Now it's turning another corner to market the book. The name of the book is To a More Positive Purpose. and you can get it on Amazon. Um, I'm excited. It's going to be it's a necessary book that really engages Tony Martin. We need to engage his scholarship. We need to engage the Marcus Garvey Library. And right now, I'm also reading Winston James's biography of Claude McKay. I was surprised when I saw that biography by Winston James that he ends in the year 1921. For me, that's the beginning of Claude McKay's intellectual journeys because he goes to so many places and writes so many hard-hitting poems, and 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 his real political life gets going in the mid 20s, not in the early. So I was like, this book ends in 1921, and then I was like, yeah. I was looking at the table of contents, and he goes from his birth year, which is 1890, and then Claude McKay's a Virgo, so he's very detailed, very analytical, very he's a sponge. And I'm learning about through Winston James, I'm learning of his older brother who was a teacher, a school teacher, highly respected thinker. He was 18 years older than Claude. And so I'll give more details about that book. Another book I'm finding very interesting, I want to finish, is one I mentioned on this program before. um, I'll burn that bridge by when I get to it, by Norman Finkelstein, who gives a very powerful analysis of cancel culture. Also reading an interesting novel now by Ann Petrie, who shares the same birthday as me because of an artist friend of mine. Um, and it's set in a Black New England town. It's called The Narrows. Never read a novel like it. In the 50s, um, the river is a character, and I love rivers. I was talking with two professionals who are scientists who study the flow of rivers. And one of the scientists said it's not something you can really quantify the power, the direction, the flow of the water. The river does what the river wants. So it's a powerful force. And I'm noticing how in this amazing novel by Ann Petrie that it's a character too. Check it out, The Narrows. I wanted to introduce you guys to Toure as an example of what Stephanie Mills mentioned as to Black industry journalists who threaten and who exploit Black artists. Because the way that Potash says Toure writes, he was helping criminalize Tupac. He was helping to absolutely criminalize the image of Tupac. And by the way, check out Jasmine Guy's amazing interview with the Breakfast Club, because I like to watch the Breakfast Club when they do intelligent interviews. Not all the time. Sometimes their work is silly, slapstick. But when they interview intelligent artists like Jasmine Guy, I watch from beginning to end. And she mentioned being interviewed herself. Yes, Mama. I hear you. That's Mama letting me know that she is also a big support in my life, and I love her. I love my mama. Yeah, she grandmas to make her presence known. I hear you, Mama. Um, so the role that Toure is playing here is justifying essentially the violent image we get of Tupac. And that is what Potash tells us here. Toure said in a Village Voice article, reading the second full sentence in this second paragraph, Toure said in a Village Voice article that it's really irrelevant who shot Tupac. It makes just as much and as little sense to argue that Tupac orchestrated the incident. So he's suggesting that Tupac orchestrated his own shooting. I'm sure Jasmine Guy would disagree. With this statement, Tupac knowingly referred to the 4 to 5 bullets, 2 of which went in and out of Tupac's head. Tupac said that reading those lines just made him start crying like a baby. This is Potash talking about Tupac's reaction to Toure writing about him. Media organizations had covered up many other periods and events in Tupac Shakur's life, and that U.S. intelligence wanted censored. For example, 10 years of research failed to uncover a single article or book that gave a full explanation of Tupac's New African Panther leadership. Virtually all media had failed to report bystanders' accounts of the Atlanta police shooting incident, despite defense attorneys and prosecutors easily obtaining them. Similarly, most New York media failed to question whether police statements that the Times Square incident um, came out from was only a random mugging. That's how it was. It was reported if it was only a random mugging. Only years later did an investigating reporter print in her book that police refused to look at the music studio lobby's security videotape of the assailants. And so this is the part where this is the part where Potash introduces Toure. Warren said that Warren is Tupac's attorney. He said that he and the other defense lawyers believe one of the worst cases of cover up regarding the shooting came from a young black reporter named Toure. Toure is also making the rounds in Vibe, talking about his cousin saying that P. Diddy fired him because um, fired Toure's relative because the relative refused his advances. And for me, that's just hearsay. And unless it's verified in a court, it's not true. It's just somebody trying to, like Toure's doing to Tupac, tarnish P. Diddy's image. And I'm not here to say that everything P. Diddy is saying is right, but I do question the fact that feds invaded his home, detained his sons without charge. We're not hearing any charges. We just hear Cassie's videotape of the details of his party. I don't care about the details of the party. I really don't. I don't care about what sexual habits they portrayed. I care about people, every citizen having due process. Due process matters. You can't just go into somebody's house, arrest them without charge. That's setting a bad precedent. So the constitutionalist in me is looking at the coverage of this and wondering, are the news reporters like Debbie Allen asked of the a different world episode when she was wanting to do an episode on AIDS, and the advertisers were pressuring the network not to show the episode. So we see the advertisers as the media moguls determining federal charges. Are they creating the charges that they're instructing Biden's White House to execute? Because it's lost on me. We as the public should know what exactly Sean Combs is charged with, and we don't. Um, so you see him again, Toure, drumming up the same fervor against Tupac that he's drumming up against P. Diddy. And for me, it just reminds me we don't know the charge. As a public, we should be aware of the charges. Um, Everyone deserves due process. You may not agree with how people live their lives, but everyone is entitled to due process. Um, so I wanted to just finish there. This is also describing the role of reporters like Toure. Some leftist information that wouldn't get published in daily newspapers still comes out in the Village Voice. It's gone now. Village Voice has ended, gratefully. But wealthy conservative businessmen influenced its content by this mid 90s time period. Wealthy owners, Potash writes, bought out the Village Voice in the 80s, and they eventually bought most other weeklies, such as the LA Weekly. They proceeded to replace liberal editors with conservatives. These sources offer few articles that differ much from the daily newspapers, whose owners also sit on boards of large, mostly conservative corporations. And then he says later that I underline research on U.S. intelligence in the media, as well as a personal interview with Toure, support Warren, Tupac's lawyer's belief that he directly or indirectly worked for U.S. intelligence. That is Tupac's lawyer saying that. So when we see him saying that his cousin thinks that he was abused by or got fired because he wouldn't take his advance, I just roll my eyes like that's not factual. That's fluff without substantiation. That's character attack, trying to validate the feds charging an individual without stating what the charge is, without making the charge clear. It's not clear in the media. This interesting interview, I was disappointed in Don Lemon. I thought he lost a great opportunity. Now he says that he's left CNN, but he seemed to be a mouthpiece for Zucker. I just see that Zucker could have asked the same questions Elon Musk asked. So he defines these vague terms. He mentions these vague terms, I mean to say, without defining them. Hate speech. What is that? He mentions the Center for Strategic Dialogue, but I think he meant the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. And so he's using these foundations that are funded by the Gates Foundation, the Open Society Foundation, funded by Soros. These are the places he gets the terms hate speech. So for me, it should have been Soros interviewing Musk or Gates interviewing, not him, because he's just going to say the same thing they're going to say. So I ended up agreeing with most of what Musk said, because of course he's allowing a fair, open platform. It's not a racist space if you don't want to follow somebody who you think is a racist. Twitter allows you, or X allows you, the opportunity to not follow them. But anyway, it was a poor job. I encourage everybody, read Elon Musk's biography, because the way he constructed SpaceX is a powerful story of ingenuity, a powerful story. That concludes. Oh yeah, and then Candace Owens. She's left the Ben Shapiro show. That means she's growing up. I'm proud of her. I don't agree with her opinion on Arbery or George Floyd at all, but I'm proud that she's shown to stand on principle. And she did that when she did not support the Israeli colonization of Palestine. Subscribe, share, like my YouTube. Bless my Cash App if you blessed. Keep reading, keep the faith. Thank you for hanging with me after about 2 months so I could finish my third book. Check it out, To a More Positive Purpose. Keep reading and keep the faith.